Calling my shot now. Michigan will beat Ohio State on Saturday. And I'll tell you why next on Michigan Podcast.
But there's going to be one team that's going to play solely as a team. No man is more important than the team. No coach is more important than the team. The team, the team, the team.
Looks deep for Anthony Clark. Waits for it. Hit. Caught.
This is no time for that. In the pocket and a sack. Tim Jamison.
Brady gets terrific. Throws it and a touchdown. Knight again. Schultz just before Brazil got him. And a leaping interception by Woodson.
Arbor back to throw over the middle. Caught by Collier at the 5 on his feet. Touchdown, Michigan. On its way. It's good.
He's 5'7", 179 pounds, a junior at Michigan. But Jamie Morris packs a wallop, and he delivers for Bo Schembechler.
And here's your first play. Pressure coming. Sack. It is Glenn Steele, number 81, who fought his way through the traffic.
Option. And Robinson calls his own number, and he's going to score. Oh, an easy touchdown for Robinson and Michigan.
Win it. We're going to win the championship again because we're going to play as a team. And when we play as a team and the old season is over, you and I know it's going to be Michigan again. Michigan.
Go Blue, I'm Steve Deace, and welcome to this week's episode of Michigan Podcast. My partners over at Wolverine Digest, Brandon Brown, Michael Spath from WTKA-Ann Ann Arbor, will be joining me here in the next segment for the Roundtable portion of the show. But first, I believe Michigan is going to beat Ohio State on Saturday. And I want to tell you why. The eerie similarities of this game leading up to the last time we had a sea change in this rivalry on the Michigan side of things 50 years ago. It's just eerie how similar these situations are. And in 1968, Michigan and Ohio State were both ranked in the top 10 at the end of the year. And we're playing in Columbus for the Big Ten championship. And Ohio State rolled Michigan. And when the score was 50-14, Woody Hayes put his starters back in to go for a 2-point conversion. And after the game, when he was asked why he did this, Woody Hayes famously said he went for 2 because, quote, I couldn't go for 3, unquote. Bump Elliott retired from the Michigan football program as its head coach after that game. And about a month later, the University of Michigan, after trying to hire Joe Paterno away from Penn State, hired a young coach, 39 years old, from Miami of Ohio, a former protege of Woody Hayes. He was his surrogate father. He played for him at Miami of Ohio. He was his chief lieutenant, offensive coordinator for him at Ohio State. And his name was Glenn E. Bo Schembechler. And that year, he installed a program that was meant to perfectly mimic and emulate Ohio State, just with his own spin on things. They got off to a bit of a squirrely start, but they got to 8-2. They had a 2-loss season. And then went into the game against Ohio State, 17-point underdogs. ABC was so confident Ohio State was going to win that they sent their B team. They didn't even send Chris Schenkel and their A team to that game. They sent the B ABC's team instead. Woody Hayes was already talking about, this is one of the best teams I've ever had. This will be one of the greatest seasons that we've ever had at Ohio State. And it was said about that team that the only team that could beat them were the Minnesota Vikings Purple People Eaters, because they were considered the top dogs in the NFL at that time. The week leading up to that game, Bo Schembechler put the number 50 on all of the Michigan practice squad jerseys so that his players would remember, because a lot of these were the exact same players that just last year had gotten embarrassed, depanted by Ohio State. And he made sure that they remembered the number 50. And then that afternoon, in front of a national audience against number 1 Ohio State, the clear best team in college football, Michigan pulled what people voted afterwards the upset of the decade, 24-12 against Ohio State. Years later, when Woody Hayes was being honored towards the end of his life, one of the guests of honor was none other than Bo Schembechler at his remembrance. And Woody stood up there, very frail, old of age, and gave a speech thanking his former players and those that had been a part of the program. And he started to talk about what might have been his best team. And he starts talking about that 1969 team. And he looks down into the front row and he glares at Bo Schembechler and he says, "Damn you, Bo, you will never win a game bigger than that one." And he was right. That game launched the next 30-plus years of Michigan football, which became one of the models for consistency and excellence in the entire sport, from Bo Schembechler to Gary Moeller to Lloyd Carr. Then we had a sea change in 2001 with Jim Tressel, the speech that he gave at halftime of the basketball game. And you'll be very proud of your team, 300 and some odd days in Ann Arbor, and Michigan, a big favorite over Ohio State that day, just needing to beat the Buckeyes, who were really going nowhere that season. Michigan just needing to beat Ohio State at home in order to get to the Big Ten championship and the Rose Bowl again. Falls down 20-0, tries to come back valiantly, but the comeback falls short. And that was another sea change. This has been a rivalry of sea changes. It's also been a rivalry of the team that comes in here with nothing to lose other than this game would give meaning to their entire season. We have seen that team win it quite a bit, and not just that 1969 season. How about in 1993? Michigan is 6-4. Ohio State undefeated with one tie, ranked number 5 in the country. Michigan wins 28-0. How about 1995? Ohio State goes to Ann Arbor, a double-digit favorite with Terry Glenn and Heisman Trophy winner Eddie George. And Tim Biaka-Batuka rushes for 300 yards, and Michigan wins 31-23. 1996. The biggest underdog Michigan had been since 1969 against number 2 Ohio State, who had already won the Big Ten championship. And Michigan goes in there and upsets the Buckeyes 13-9 in Columbus. I already mentioned 2001. How about 2004? Michigan has already clinched the Big Ten championship in the Rose Bowl. Goes down to Columbus as about a 9.5-point favorite, just as Ohio State is here for this week, and loses that game to Ohio State. There's a lot of history here pointing to what I'm talking about. But beyond the history, and I don't believe Michigan's due. I don't believe that teams are due for anything. The only thing due in sports is rain. All right, you're not due. I mean, Michigan's been quote unquote due against Ohio State since before Taylor Swift wrote her first breakup song. Now, when you have a program as consistently great and dominant as Ohio State, you got to come and take it from them. If you look at the last 5 games of analytics, when you look at offensive and defensive efficiency, yards per play differential, all of the stuff that creates a true power rating, over the last 5 games, Michigan and Ohio State have been virtually identical. Ohio State's been playing at the same high level it's played all season, but Michigan has matched it. So what we're really saying is, based on how they're playing right now, these are 2 of the top 3 or 4 teams in the country. And I just think with the home field advantage, the way that they are ascending, and the way that they put this team back together again, when all seemed lost, when your head coach is in Chicago calling out his shot, yeah, I'd pick us to win the championship too, and that's off the table before you even get to all the biggest games of the season against your rivals, Notre Dame, Michigan State, and Ohio State. And if you look at the way that this rivalry has been played under Jim Harbaugh, you know, you go back to 2 years ago, Michigan had no business being in that game with John O'Korn at quarterback, but they were at home. And it was 14-0 Michigan, 21-14 going into the fourth quarter. I think the time has come now. And I think you're going to see Ohio State, you're going to pucker a little bit. You haven't played a real road game all year. Justin Fields has never faced anything like the environment he is going to face on Saturday. And I just think when you add all of that up, I think you're going to see finally Michigan for the first time in 15 years, because I don't count 2011. Yeah, I mean, it counts. I watched the game. I enjoyed it. But let's face it, that was an Ohio State program that season that was a shell of itself, and Michigan still barely won that game. No, for the first time when Ohio State was a fully armed and operational battle station, I think you'll see Michigan beat the Buckeyes. Ohio State will still go on, win the Big Ten championship, play in the college football playoff, but I think Michigan will take its first or its next big step to getting back to being the leaders and best and victors valiant by finally slaying the Buckeye behemoth. And then I look forward to reading the comments section here after that happens. Go Blue. Hey, I want to introduce you to a brand new partner of ours here at Michigan Podcast, Hero Soap Company. Check these guys out. Veteran-owned soap company. Sign up for a subscription and get soap delivered right to your door each and every month. 3 different options starting at just $5 a month, all the way up to the Battalion package, or as I like to call it, the Buckeye package. 3 bars of soap each month for those Buckeye fans out there who need some extra help getting that stink off. The best part of this is Hero Soap Company donates a portion of each purchase to help veterans and active military, something all of us can unite behind, Wolverines, Buckeyes, Sparties alike. Use the promo code Michigan Podcast and get 10% off of your order. Promo code Michigan Podcast, all one word, and get high quality soap without having to go to the store. Hero Soap Company. Check them out online at herosoapcompany.com. Let freedom clean. Well, let's get to this week's Wolverine Digest Roundtable here on Michigan Podcast. I'm joined by my partners over at the Wolverine Digest, Brandon Brown and Michael Spath. Gentlemen, good to have you. You can also hear these two guys each weekday on WTKA-Ann and Arbor. Look for that with the iHeartRadio app. You can listen to that anywhere around the country live. But gentlemen, I'm just going to get right to what I led off the show with. I'm calling the shot. I think Michigan is going to win on Saturday. I think Michigan is finally going to get off the schneid. I think when you look at the way the game is setting up, the way the two teams match up, when you look at analytics over the last 5 games, these are 2 of the top 3 teams in the country. When you look at yards per play, advanced stats like offensive and defensive efficiency, and a lot of those other analytics. And then I think the weather forecast also will take away some of the overall speed advantage that Ohio State has in the game. I also think it's a tricky management spot for Ohio State. It's not a tricky motivational spot. It's the greatest rivalry in college football. But if you are Ryan Day, if they lose this game and beat Minnesota next week or Wisconsin, they're in the playoff. If they win this game and lose next week, though, the chances they make the playoff are lower. And if you just ran your tailback 36 times last week against one of the best rush defenses in the country, you've got a quarterback with maybe a sprained thumb, maybe a bit of a sprained ankle, you're not going to not try to win. But you're not going to run J.K. Dobbins 36 times in back-to-back games when you've got the Big Ten championship game coming right after that. And then you're trying to win 2 more games after that. And meanwhile, I think for Michigan, this is it. This is their whole season. I mean, who knows how many players play or sit in a bowl game next time or what have you. This, to me, is their spot where they have nothing to lose. They can throw anything they want into the game. And I like the way that they are ascending here at this time. It is the first true road game for Ohio State when their schedule has set up there for them perfectly. And we have seen in this rivalry guys pucker when they go on the road, particularly when it's the first time they have faced the road environment in this rivalry. I think Jim Harbaugh finally beats Ohio State and gets it done on Saturday. Your thoughts? And Brandon, I'll start with you.
Oh man, I just can't quite get there yet. I know there's the whole like gamblers, the gamblers fallacy or whatever, that all the previous games have nothing to do with the one that's going to be played on Saturday. But Ohio State is still the more talented team. I get that they haven't been tested on the road this year yet. I mean, their hardest game on the road has literally been against Indiana. They won by, 52-10, I think was the final there. I can't quite bring myself to thinking that Michigan's going to win yet. I do think and I've said this a couple of times on the radio throughout the week and at a speaking engagement last night that Michael took us out to. Michigan has a legitimate shot, and I would not have said that 5 or 6 weeks ago. So obviously some things are changing. Michigan's definitely ascending in a positive trajectory. I think Ohio State's been really good all year. I don't know if they're I don't know if they're coming down or if they've kind of plateaued or how you want to describe it.
I don't think they're coming down at all. I think Michigan is on the way up. I don't think Ohio State's coming down at all. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think they're where they've kind of been. I know last week against Penn State for at least a quarter, we saw what a team can look like in a little bit of limbo. I just can't say it yet. I can't do it yet. I said this a couple different ways, a couple different times. I think if these two teams played 10 times, Michigan might win 2 or 3, and hell, one of them might be this Saturday. So they've got a shot. I do think Ohio State's the better team, top to bottom, but Michigan's got a shot. And the way Shay Patterson has been playing, the way the receivers have been playing, they're going to have a chance for some explosive plays against a very, very good defense. But I still can't help but give the slight edge to the Buckeyes.
Totally fair. What do you think, Michael?
Yeah, it was funny because when Brandon started, we started with like an exasperated sigh, and I was like, "Come on, man! Like, get excited! Like, throw your hat in the ring for the Wolverines here." I was talking to. I have one friend who's a Buckeye, and that's about as many friends as I want that are Buckeyes. And he said to me when I asked him, what was, I said I'm desperate for a win, and he's like, yeah, I'm desperate for it too. And I'm like, yeah, why? And he said, because we really want the number 1 seed, so we don't have to play Clemson in the first round of the playoffs. And I'm like, that's your desperation. Your desperation is for your seeding in the playoffs. So I kind of agree a little bit with you, and I know he doesn't represent the entire fan base or the entire program, but I mean, like, if that's what you're thinking, like, man, we're so desperate to win this game because we're trying to improve our playoff seeding versus Michigan, we're desperate to win this game because it's been a gajillion years since we've beaten Ohio State, and it would finally, justify everything that we thought Jim Harbaugh was and take that monkey off their shoulder, all those things. I think Michigan's coming to this game from a better motivational standpoint than Ohio State. I think they're coming into the game playing their best football, and do they have the athletes to match up with the Buckeyes? I'm gonna argue that I think Brandon actually made this point. We were doing a speaking engagement on Monday that there's only 11 guys on the football field.
Yeah.
It's not, if you look at the scope of 24/7's composite rankings and you see that Ohio State's way more talented than Michigan. Well, that's because they're way more talented 1 through 85 than Michigan. They're not way more talented than Michigan 1 through 22 or 1 through 25 because you've got some depth guys going in there. And so I like Michigan's talent to match up with them. Can they slow down Justin Fields and J.K. Dobbins? Nobody has been able to really this year, and that's the ultimate challenge. But Michigan is the best team that Ohio State's going to face all year. And we have seen so many times this season, every year in college football, where teams go on the road and they're favored by 8, 10, 12, 14 points, where they're a big favorite and they lose or the game is close because when you go on the road, things just happen. You get tense, you get nervous about it. The crowd is against you and you don't play your best football. And maybe Justin Fields is already one of those rare athletes that just is immune to that type of stuff. But I don't think any of us can say that for certain. And I wonder a little bit, Steve, I mean, I know that you're a big gambling guy, and the line has moved 3 points or 2.5 points in just about 48 hours here. I mean, that to me is a tremendous difference. When people are talking about how it should probably stay the same or maybe go towards Ohio State's favor a little bit, I think Michigan has a legit chance. I'm at 50-50, and that's a hell of a lot further than I was 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, or certainly back in October.
I think there's some concerns about Justin Fields' health. I think that's what's causing the line move you're talking about.
Okay.
And Ohio State announced today he's not going to be made available to the media this week. I think there is some concerns about that. And you have to again realize, what's fascinating, guys. About a month ago, Ari Wasserman, who covers Ohio State for The Athletic, put out a poll on his Twitter account asking Ohio State fans, hey, if you had a choice between beating Michigan and not making the playoff and making the playoff but losing to Michigan, which would you choose? And an overwhelming majority of Ohio State fans said they'd rather beat Michigan. This week, he put the same poll out there, and the results were almost exactly in reverse. Now that the situation's actually here, because and I got to believe if we had beaten them a whole bunch of times in a row too, and then might have our best team historically in that span when you look at the analytics, national championships are not easy to win. They had the most talented team in the country back in 2015. They didn't even get to the Big Ten championship game with that team because they crapped the bed in a terrible weather game against Michigan State at home. These things are not easy to win. You're getting a year where Alabama's starting quarterback is out. They may not even make the playoff. LSU is going to get in, but LSU's defense has some issues. You're getting a year where you're thinking, you know what, we might actually be able to win this thing again. And if you're Ryan Day, I know that he's going to do this. I mean, they're gonna say we've got to figure out how we're going to win this with J.K. Dobbins running 28 times instead of 36. And if you've got a bum thumb and a bum wheel on your quarterback, and he's looking at, he's got 3 more games to play here, or 2 more games to play, 3 more, counting this game, in the next 28 days to play for high stakes, you're going to say, we can't really have him running that ball 15 times. We're also maybe are concerned about him throwing these routes, X, Y, Z. Those things are going to come into play, I believe, in this game. And I think fans, these guys are not automatons. These aren't video game sprites. They're human beings, and you have to acknowledge the reality of their limitations. And I just think when you're playing for history, you're gonna game plan that out, because however much they hate us, guys, if they beat us on Saturday, and then the cost is Justin Fields for the rest of the season, that Michigan win's going to feel real hollow when they're watching other teams advance into the playoffs. But I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. What do you think, Michael?
No, I think that makes a lot of sense, honestly. I guess it really just comes down to how banged up Justin Fields is. If his wrist is really sore and he's limited. Now, I think it was his left wrist, correct?
Yeah, it was the left one, yes.
I think so. It's not his throwing wrist, but certainly you don't want to put him in a cast going into the Big Ten championship game. Yeah, I get that. I just, I don't know. I mean, what is the alternative? Are they going to put their backup quarterback in? They're not going to put their backup quarterback in this game. And so do they limit the amount of times that he runs the football? I think that's probably what it comes down to, is they say, hey, we're gonna call our read option, but maybe it's kind of like what we saw early in the year with when Shay Patterson was banged up. It looks like a read option, but it's really not. It's designed to hand off the ball to J.K. Dobbins, and the good thing for Ohio State is they do have 2 dynamic running backs in J.K. and a Master Teague. That's actually the guy's real name, Master Teague, kind of like Mr. Simpson. So they do have that, and they can certainly utilize both those guys, but. I think the mobility, the Justin Fields taking off, I think there might be a little bit of like, hey, Justin, we've got a lot of really big fish to fry here. And so just protect yourself out there. And the moment you tell a quarterback to protect themselves or to not go as hard as possible, that ultimately, impacts how that guy's going to perform in that game. And so I think it's going to be really interesting to see. I don't know. Part of me is like looking at what Urban Meyer said earlier this week, where he's like, hey, I've won 2 national championships, but going 7-0 against Michigan was a prouder accomplishment for me. And think that with all you just said, Steve, that these people are so backwards that some of them, I know the Ari Wasserman poll, but I don't know. I wonder how many people would just trade the national championship for another victory over Michigan.
Well, I think I see what you're saying, but Brandon, I think that there's evidence that we've already seen for what I'm contending, and it's the game we saw on Saturday against Penn State, where you saw in the second half, you saw some very puckery play calling from some very Al Borges-esque play calling from Ryan Day down in the second half of that game. 3rd and 4, 3rd and 5, and they're just running zone read bluff runs and not even actually, running the sorts of quarterback draws and things they did with Justin Fields early in the game. I don't think Ryan Day suddenly took David Duvall at the 18th green in the Masters with Tiger Woods group pills. I think that was an acknowledgement that they were concerned about some of the limitations that they were dealing with that they thought were probably a result of the turnovers they saw. Very similar to what we saw Josh Gaddis and Michigan do in the Army game with Shay Patterson and some of the things we saw early in the year where we saw this confounding play calling that just didn't make any sense. And I think you saw that with Ohio State a little bit on Saturday against Penn State.
It certainly adds up. I mean, in the not making him available to the media this week, that is very interesting. I mean, I don't know how many times he's talked this year, if he's a every week kind of thing. I mean, I haven't paid that close attention to it, but yeah, you're certainly not going to bring him out in front of the media throng with a splint or a cast on his hand or a walking boot if he's dealing with an ankle or whatever the scenario is. So yeah, that's really interesting, because if you take the wheels away from him, it doesn't render him ineffective, but that is a game changer in what they can do on offense and what he is able to do either on designed runs or on quarterback scrambles. So yeah, I mean, it's not something I paid super close attention to in terms of, how they were calling plays for him on Saturday, but it certainly seems to be carrying water a little bit with just some of the developments, not being in front of the media, the way things went last week, a little bit of a change in thought process from the people in Columbus, whether it's a Twitter poll or people who actually make decisions. There seems to be a little bit of smoke, and almost all the time in today's day and age, when there's smoke, there's fire. When you start to hear some chatter on social media, or you read between the lines a little bit, or some unspoken signals. So that is a very interesting developing storyline as Saturday approaches. That would change things a little bit. If Justin Fields is not at 100% and they're not going to use him as a runner, and Michigan can tee off on him a little bit and get him on the ground, that changes them in a big, big way.
So here are let's say none of those things are a factor and it's just a straight up game. These are what I think the three keys to this game from a Michigan perspective. And I really am going to go a lot on what I saw against Penn State. And the reason being is Ohio State's played a pretty good schedule this year. It's just that all their big games have been at home. But Penn State was really the first team that could stand up in the trenches without getting mollywopped, but also provided some explosion in the skill positions. They really haven't played a team that brought both of those things to the table at the same time. Penn State's the only other dynamic recruiting team that they have faced so far this season. So I'm far more interested in what I saw in that game than even what I saw in the Wisconsin game, for example. And the two things I think we saw in that game, number one, that really, the linchpin, the foundation of the entire Ohio State offense is the inside run with J.K. Dobbins. And then the hope that you will overcommit to clogging that up so then he uses his speed to cut back and get outside for big gains. That he's really the straw that stirs the drink here. And so Michigan's ability to defend that run with 4 or 5 guys, I think, is a big key. The other thing that I think will be an issue in this game is the ability to attack Ohio State between the tackles. We saw Penn State have success, albeit with a quarterback in the game, where and that alleviates some of the speed factor with a Chase Young, and to a lesser degree the freshman Zach Harrison coming off the edge. They don't really have who's the guy they had last year, Draymond. Jordan, or who am I thinking of? The guy that was kind of their plugger in the middle last year. They don't really have that kind of a 2-gap run stopper on their defense. So I think stopping their inside run and being able to establish it on your end, I think, are 2 keys. And then I think, and this is aside from the obvious ones. Everybody knows you can't let Chase Young beat you. You got to win the turnover battle, yada, yada, yada. Any gumshoe handicapper can come up with that analysis. I'm talking about stuff that maybe people might often miss. And then the third thing, Drew Hallett wrote about this today, something I noticed as well on Saturday, but he really put some good numbers on it over at the Wolverine today. They're actually 96th or something in pass pro on must pass downs. Really the key to their passing game is they get to dictate to you when they throw. that it's very seldom that Justin Fields is sitting back there on 3rd and 8, 3rd and 7, and you know that he has to throw and read a defense. That often these are play actions, or they fake a bluff run and then he's throwing, to guys open down the field. A little bit like the old triple option when they pull the ball back and scare you to death and then beat you over the top. That's a lot of their passing game. And so Michigan forcing them into must-pass situations where Justin Fields has to stand up in a pocket, read a defense, and find a second or third read. I think those are the three keys. One, stopping their inside run, or at least getting a stalemate there. Two, establishing some of that on your end that also will slow down their pass rush. And then third, how many times does Ohio State throw because they have to rather than they're choosing to? Your thoughts on those keys, Michael?
Well, I don't know that you need me, honestly. Those were all really good. Really good. From what I saw in the Penn State game on Saturday, I would really like to hone in on the third one, because there are a couple of times where they were in 3rd and 6 or even 3rd and 5, and what you saw in those plays was Penn State pinned their ears back, and they kind of abandoned this idea that they would spy Justin Fields, and they just decided that what they're going to do is they're going to blitz Micah Parsons or some of their, one of their other linebackers, and just come with 5 or 6 guys and hope that you could confuse Justin Fields, hope that he would panic a little bit, and that you'd get to him before he'd get the ball out. And I got to say, they gave up, Ohio State gave up 3 sacks, and I think a good portion of them were because Justin Fields felt overwhelmed by a front 7. And how many times this year did he really feel overwhelmed in his own pocket? Probably not a lot. And so I think that's a big one. If Michigan can have that early success, as you said, stopping J.K. Dobbins, and if Justin Fields is good to go 100%, and then put in those situations. And when you put in those situations, this is as good of a blitz pass rush team as there is in college football. When you can tell Josh Uche, hey, you don't have any responsibility here, but just go get the quarterback. Hey, Kwity Paye, no responsibility here, but just go get the quarterback. Jordan Glasgow, we're going to use you on like a double stunt here and get in there. Cam McGrone, same thing. They can be very, very potent. And so I think those are all really good ones. And the running game to me is really intriguing, because Michigan got so good at it in that stretch of really started against Penn State a little bit, but then Notre Dame and Maryland, and before Penn State, the Illinois game. 3 out of 4 games, Michigan had this really strong rushing attack, and then they completely went away from it in these last 2 games against Michigan State and Indiana. And I'm not going to crush them for that, because this is the type of offense I wanted to see all year long, is this passing game. But now they're going to have to kind of go back to a little bit of that running game, especially if the weather holds out like it's supposed to, rain, sleet, crummy conditions on Saturday. And so if they can attack the middle of the Ohio State offense or defensive line and really keep Chase Young guessing, suddenly you neutralize their biggest defensive playmaker. You neutralize Jeffrey Okudah too. You really take out the 2 best players for this Ohio State defense, and then I really like Michigan's chances. But I'll be very curious. I'm really excited about this game. There's so many possibilities. The culmination of 11 contests and everything you've been working on, and I'm excited. This is we're going to either see the best of Michigan football, or we're not going to see the best of Michigan football, and I really don't want to contemplate that right now.
This goes back to last year's game as well on the pass rush front, Brandon, because, hold on a second. Dwayne Haskins still has time to throw. There was no pass rush at all. I think Chase Winovich, if we were probably playing any other game last season other than Ohio State, I don't know that he plays. You had Rashawn Gary, who never really fully came back from the injury he had to that shoulder early in the season. And those were really your primary pass rush guys, unless Don Brown had to dial it up. I don't know that we have anybody that's that physically talented on our front this year, but I feel like there's more options, more opportunities to organically create pass rushes. I think we have rushed just 4 or 5 guys this year, as much more than any year we've had under Don Brown. And I think part of that is what we're talking about here. There's more options to create that pressure and get to the quarterback. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think we've talked about that, throughout the year, that the defensive line might not have the star. I think even Chris Hutchinson last night said it, and his own son is one of those who might be lacking star power a little bit, although I think Aiden's pretty darn good. But yeah, in terms of, a top 10 or 12 pick like Rashawn Gary, a guy like Chase Winovich, who has proven his salt in the NFL so far this year, there's maybe not a guy like that, but across the board. And then when you talk about Don Brown dialing it up from the linebacker position, Josh Uche, who's kind of formed a specialized role for himself, Michigan is getting enough pressure on quarterbacks to make the days long for pretty much anybody who has tried to play the position against them. And it's a combination of the players are still really good. I mean, I think there's some future NFL guys in that group, maybe not as high up there as Rashawn Gary or, yet to be seen if they'll be as effective as Chase Winovich has been early in his career. But a lot of guys who can do a lot of things, talking about Aiden Hutchinson moving him from the outside to the inside. Didn't really see that with anybody last year. And just disciplined, smart dudes. I mean, we talked about this with Don Brown, how he's mentioned Kwity Paye as maybe one of the smartest defensive linemen he's ever coached. That was more of talking about the run fits and stopping the zone read, but still just intelligent, always where he's supposed to be. And I think we see that across the board with the defensive linemen and the linebackers. They're just really sound. They're gap sound. They're in position. They don't run too far upfield. They don't get lost on stunts. They don't get lost in the wash when they're getting blocked down. They just always manage to be where they're supposed to be. We didn't see that as much against Wisconsin, and we all know the result. But ever since then, it's been pretty good. And I think that's important for a running quarterback. That's important for a guy like Justin Fields who wants to get out and move the chains with his legs. But it's also really important for rushing the passer. It kind of just constricts. The whole pocket just kind of closes down on the quarterback from all angles, as opposed to maybe one guy or two guys putting pressure on from the same spot every time. So it's definitely been a different approach, but it's been just as effective. And I mean, the defense is playing fast, they're playing free and loose, and they're really stifling the running game, which in turn is making teams kind of lean on the pass a little bit, and they've been really good in that area too.
So gentlemen, final thing, let's talk about what we are going to be talking about next week at this time. To me, I think this is a game that defines not just the season that Michigan had, but the narrative around the program. I think if Michigan wins, this is, in my view, I think it's at least the best season Michigan's had since 2006, 2003. And depending on what happens in the postseason, it could be the best season Michigan's had since 1999, when it didn't win the Big Ten title, but it did beat Ohio State and Notre Dame. It did win a bowl game, the Orange Bowl against Alabama, and finished number 5. That's the last time Michigan has finished in the top 5, was 1999, if you can believe that. And I think this team has a chance to do something like that. And I think by doing it, by beating all the rivals, beating a couple of top 10 teams now in Ohio State and Notre Dame, a lot of the boxes that Harbaugh was asked to check got checked this season, except the top box, obviously, winning the Big Ten championship. But then it can be, then you start looking at the previous Ohio State losses retroactively, and you say, well, that really was an Urban Meyer factor. I mean, look, the first year Urban Meyer's gone, he not only beats Ohio State, but beats the team that was probably statistically better than all the teams that he lost to. So that's the positive. If they lose this game, this is going to feel like another, what I like to call, empty calories season, where if Michigan were a vending machine, man, there's some great Cheez-Its in there. There's some Reese's peanut butter cups, something that gives you a quick bolt, and some enjoyment, and you feel good for a while, but like an hour or so later, you're like, man, I really could use some steak and potatoes here. I could use a big fat burger. I need something that, fills my belly up here. And this will be, and then people will say, well, yeah, they beat Notre Dame and Michigan State, but again, still can't beat Ohio State, still can't get to the Big Ten championship game. And then what your guys are going to be debating for the next 9 months on your radio program, and what I'll be talking about here is Michigan's cap a 3-loss program, or is that just Jim Harbaugh's ceiling? Right? And we've had all these conversations, we're tired of them, but we're going to have them all over again. I think that's what's at stake here ultimately on Saturday. Brandon, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, gosh, man, if he drops another one, it's 0-5. And I mean,
only coach that's never happened before. No Michigan coach has lost 4 in a row, been 0-4 against Ohio State, let alone 0-5.
Yeah, and I mean, you hate to think of a season where you blow out Notre Dame, you blow out Michigan State, and then you lose to Ohio State, and it's a failure of a season. But, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, when you look at who Michigan played this year, take the best 3 teams or the 3 hardest games, I guess. I think you could argue that Notre Dame is in the discussion with Wisconsin and Penn State and Ohio State as the 3 or 4 most talented teams. But the 3 hardest games on your schedule were at Wisconsin, at Penn State, and at home against Ohio State, and you lost all 3. And so I just don't – and you talk about Jim Harbaugh being in year 5 and still hasn't played for a Big Ten title and still hasn't beat Ohio State. Like, what is he here for then? And I know that sounds harsh, but it's the truth. When you hire Jim Harbaugh, if you ask anybody who has anything to do with Michigan, you say, okay, in 5 years, he'll have 4 10-win seasons, but you'll never play for a title and you'll never beat Ohio State. I don't know if many people would sign up for that. And if he loses this weekend, that's where we're at. So, I mean, the stakes are high. The expectations are high. Everybody thinks Jim Harbaugh is one of the, you could fudge the number a little bit, but one of the top 10 or 12 best coaches in the country. But if he's failing to do 2 of his biggest 3 goals year in and year out, that is a discussion you have to have. I mean, is that what Michigan just is now? Like, Jim Harbaugh making all this money, recruiting well, putting butts in the seats, but you can't every single year 2 of your 3 goals are not met. That's a tough pill to swallow. And yeah, you're right, Steve. We've been talking about it. We'll continue to talk about it. And it's only going to get louder and more intense if he can't beat Ohio State on Saturday.
Michael, you get the final word.
Well, I know that there's a lot of people that think I'm the pessimistic of the bunch, although I think Brandon has outdone me this football season. I'm just, you know what, Steve, this is a cop-out, but I'm going to wait until it happens before I comment on it. I don't need to consider the scenarios of what we'll have to say about Jim Harbaugh if he can't beat Ohio State. And I'd much rather it's Thanksgiving week. It's the week of the game. I'm excited about it. I'm glad to be excited about it. From the depths of despair that we were at during that, after that Wisconsin game, and certainly during the first half of the Penn State game, this Michigan football team has given us a lot of optimism, a lot of hope, a lot of fun these last 4 weeks, 4 games, and I'm in a good place right now. And so when the discussion, if he loses and we have to have that discussion on Monday and everything after that, I'm going to agree with a lot of what Brandon said, but I'm going to let it play out. And I hope that come Saturday night, the town of Ann Arbor is rocking, and we're all celebrating, and we're talking about what a great win. And I'll say this, I agree with you. If they win this game on Saturday, I think it'll go down as one of the better seasons that Michigan has had. You take 97, and then you say, okay, what is the second best after 1997? And I think when you look at that, this is going to be right in that conversation with some of the seasons that you mentioned. So I'm going to keep my fingers crossed, keep the optimism flowing. I'm at 51% in terms of my chance. I think the chances are for Michigan to win, and I'm just going to stay there until I don't have to stay there any longer, whether because it's a win or because it's a loss.
I like it, and I think that the job this staff has done bringing this team back, it's one of the most stunning turnarounds in season that we never saw coming, particularly with Shay Patterson. I can't believe I forgot to bring him up. I should do that before we check out of here. I cannot think of a Michigan quarterback who just had that you just didn't see coming. I mean, this wasn't like he was kind of slowly progressing. It's literally like someone walked into the darkness and said, "Let there be light." And Shay Patterson just said, "Yeah, I'm in." I mean, this has been a stunning turnaround, the way they held this team together when they were talking openly about winning the championship before the season. The coach is even calling a shot in Chicago, and you have that taken off the board with a lot of still the biggest games on the schedule left to go, and the way they've rallied, that's another reason why I think they're going to win on Saturday, because I think that all of that was done with this end goal in mind. I think the way they abandoned the run against Michigan State, I think, was strategic because teams had lit Michigan State up throwing the football. And then I think they did it on Saturday against Indiana just to keep it going, to show this wasn't a one-time thing. We believe in our quarterback. I just like the vibe. I like the way that they're playing, and they're peaking at the exact right time, and they're walking in here and there's no pressure on them really at all, which none of us saw coming, because all the pressure going into this season was on Michigan, because they finally had to meet all these expectations. And now suddenly they're sitting here in a situation very reminiscent of 1996, 1993, 1995, or the situation that Ohio State was in 2001, 2004. And we have seen in this rivalry that the team that is in a situation, if it's close enough in talent, and it feels like it's playing with house money, we have seen so many times in this rivalry how that has been the team that has ended up winning the day. Let's hope we see it again come Saturday. Gentlemen, happy Thanksgiving to both of you as well. Thank you for joining us. Go Blue. Take care.
All right. Thanks, Steve.
Michigan Podcast brought to you by Wolverine Digest, now part of Sports Illustrated. That's right, the SI.com network. That's myself, Steve Deace, Michael Spath, and Brandon Brown, bringing you tons of content each and every day at WolverineDigest.com, and it's all free. Analysis, video, commentary, breakdowns, everything you need to be an informed Michigan fan. You're going to get it every single day at WolverineDigest.com. And keep in mind, we don't require access to the program in order for us to generate content. So we give you unvarnished, unfiltered analysis. Yes, we're Michigan fans. We want Michigan to do well, but we don't see it any other way other than calling balls and strikes, and that includes the home team too. Go to WolverineDigest.com now. This week's Twitter poll results, we asked you, will Michigan beat Ohio State? 64% of you, 2 out of 3, said no. 36% said yes. And I'm with the 36%. This week's question of the week, AJ wants to know, are you back to bathing in the Kool-Aid again? No. Nope. I haven't had really a lot of emotion in giving you my analysis. I've offered several data points. I've offered historical precedents. I haven't told you Michigan's due. It's their. No, I don't believe in any of that stuff. In fact, I've rebuked that. And I got burned by bathing in the Kool-Aid last year. And then about the middle of this season, it started feeling a little bit like acid rain. So no, this has nothing to do with Kool-Aid at all. And this is a good thing for me to remind folks that watch this. Hey, you said this then, but now you're saying this now. I don't, what's going on? Well, what's going on is there were certain facts we knew then, and and now we have more facts now. I mean, if I believed something based on the facts that I knew then, and the new facts came in that showed me what I previously believed was not correct, should I continue believing what I now know isn't true? Who does that? Children. All right? Adults understand that when facts change, so does your opinion and analysis. Because the facts are reality, your opinion and analysis aren't, unless they line up with those facts. So when I was hard on the team and the program, you may not have liked it, and I get it. I didn't like it, by the way. I'm a diehard. I love my team, but I also won't deny what I've been seeing in front of me. Nor will I deny it now the other way to give you some fake objectivity. Now, the objectivity I give you is the best I can do. What I see based on what I've seen. And what I'm seeing right now is the team we finally thought we were going to have all season long. Let me leave you with this final thought. If Michigan had not lost 2 games and was playing the way it's played the last 5 weeks and had spent all season ranked in the top 10 where they began it, and Ohio State still was as good as they have been all year long, but Michigan had played more like this all season long, would Michigan be a 9.5 point favorite? Would Michigan be a 9.5 point underdog? No. They'd probably be favored by 1 or 2 points because they're at home. So that line is largely built off of the way Michigan played in September and October and the public perception that developed as a result. Well, we're not playing the Michigan team. That's not the team we're watching right now. This is a dramatically different team with a dramatically different quarterback, which is why that line is dramatically out of whack. Because if Michigan had played this way all year long, like it was expected to when it was the preseason Big Ten favorite just about everywhere, it wouldn't be a 9.5-point underdog to Ohio State this week. It'd be a pick 'em or favored by 1 or 2 because it's home. So that tells me that a lot of this is based off of games Ohio State played before us and that Michigan played before we played Ohio State, but that was a different Michigan team than I think the one Ohio State's going to see on Saturday. And that Michigan team, I think, is going to beat Ohio State in front of the nation. I look forward to seeing you again here next week and celebrating a great big Michigan victory. Don't forget to leave us 5-star reviews, likes, subscribes, whether it's YouTube, iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, whichever platform you access us from. The more of those we get, we greatly appreciate it. That helps us to spread the word about what we're doing here each week at Michigan Podcast. And a special shout out to our friends at Detroit Sports Podcast for sharing what we do here as well. Happy Thanksgiving to all of you. Whether you root for Michigan or any other team, it's a pleasure to have you watching and listening to us each week here on Michigan Podcast, and Go Blue.